Chapter 3. Into the Forest. The forest was darker than it had any right to be. Even though it was mid-afternoon, the dense canopy above let through only slivers of sunlight. The air felt heavier here, cool and damp, with the faint smell of earth and moss. Mark followed the rough path marked on the map, his footsteps crunching softly against the forest floor. Every so often he stopped to check his bearings. The map wasn't much help. It was old and faded, with landmarks that no longer seemed to exist. Still, the red circle loomed in his mind, a beacon he couldn't ignore. The further he went, the quieter it became. No birds, no rustling leaves, just the sound of his own breathing and the occasional crack of a twig underfoot. He felt like the forest was watching him, its trees leaning closer with each step, as if whispering secrets he wasn't meant to hear. He reached the first landmark the map described, a stone arch, almost hidden by vines and moss. It was crumbling, its edges weathered by time. As Mark stepped closer, he noticed faint carvings on the stone. Most were worn away, but a single phrase in faded letters stood out. Some doors should remain closed. He swallowed hard, suddenly aware of the pounding in his chest. The forest behind him felt impossibly still. He considered turning back, but something, call it curiosity, call it stupidity, kept him moving forward. Beyond the arch, the path narrowed, winding between ancient trees. The ground became uneven, and Mark stumbled more than once, catching himself on the rough bark of nearby trunks. Each time he glanced around, half expecting to see someone, or something, watching him. But the forest was empty, or so it seemed. After what felt like hours, he reached the spot marked on the map. The path opened into a small clearing, and there it was, the entrance to the mine. The opening was framed by broken wooden beams, their edges splintered and rotting. Rusted tools and debris littered the ground, half buried in dirt and weeds. A sign leaning precariously against one of the beams read, "Danger, do not enter." Mark hesitated. The air here was colder, carrying an almost metallic tang. He felt the weight of the warning Greta had given him that morning. He could turn back. He could return to the hostel, pack his bags, and leave this strange town behind. Instead, he stepped closer. The mine's entrance yawned before him, dark and silent. He pulled out his flashlight and clicked it on, the beam cutting through the blackness. The tunnel stretched far beyond the light's reach, its walls rough and damp. As he stepped inside, his footsteps echoed, bouncing off the walls like ghostly whispers. The air grew colder with each step. His flashlight revealed rusted rails, broken planks, and abandoned equipment. The further he went, the more it felt like the mine was alive, breathing in tandem with him. Then he saw it, a wooden table, battered and uneven, sitting in the middle of the tunnel. On it was a single item, a notebook, its cover cracked and peeling. Mark approached cautiously, the beam of his flashlight trembling slightly. He picked up the notebook. It was lighter than he expected, and when he opened it, he found the pages filled with handwriting. The ink was smudged in places, but the words were still legible. "We shouldn't have come here. The forest isn't just alive, it remembers. We've woken something we can't control." Mark flipped through the pages, his hands shaking. Most of the entries were fragmented, detailing strange sounds, disappearing team members, and sightings of shadowy figures. On the last page, written in large, frantic letters, was a single phrase, "They will find you." A sudden sound behind him made him spin around, flashlight raised. It was faint, like a footstep on gravel. But the tunnel was empty, its shadows unmoving. "Hello?" he called out, his voice echoing back to him. The silence that followed was suffocating. And then he saw it, a faint glimmer further down the tunnel, like the reflection of light on metal. It was gone as quickly as it appeared, but it was enough to send a chill down his spine. Mark slipped the notebook into his bag and turned back the way he came. His footsteps quickened, each step louder than the last. The mine felt tighter now, the air heavier, the darkness pressing against him. When he finally emerged into the clearing, he gasped for air, his breath clouding in the cold. The forest was just as silent as before, but something was different now. The trees seemed closer, their branches curling like fingers. And behind him, just at the edge of the mine's shadow, something moved,